Good morning, fellow Toastmasters, once again. It's such a pleasure to present this speech because it is really an amalgamation of many, many things that I've learned over the years, many of them from you. So much of this will feel very familiar. But it was given in an effort to help people to understand that speaking is a journey. Even very experienced speakers feel like this fellow whom I call, Henry, when they get up to speak. Our hands do get sweaty. We do have butterflies. We do forget what we were getting ready to say, but that's okay. My goal is to talk about how do you prepare for a speech? What are the things you do to make sure that you give the best speech that you personally can give and learn along the way? So there are 4 components to it. One is to plan, the next is to compose, then you prepare, and then you deliver. And each has some very important elements that you need to keep in mind as you're doing it. So first of all, let's talk about planning. It's not hard, but I suggest that you sit down and you write down what your purpose is. What do you want to accomplish by this speech? Particularly if you're doing this for business, sometimes the purpose has been given to you, but you have some some leverage in there to understand how you're going to accomplish that purpose. So remind yourself of what you want to do. The next I recommend may sound counterintuitive, but you should write down your conclusion. You might say, why would I write the conclusion now? I haven't even written the speech. Because as you write the speech, you're building to the conclusion. So you've told yourself what the end game is. Think about it. When you go on vacation, you don't plan it without knowing where you're going. You want to know where you want to go, what you want to leave your audience with. Write that down first. You will tweak it, but write it down first. Then define your time. Now, time's important for a lot of reasons, and we certainly know that at Toastmasters. But there are 2 elements. One is, how long do I have until the speech? And what do I have to get done between now and when I give it? The second is, how much time do I have when I give the speech? And you need to be planning all the time around those 2, because if you don't, you get cut short on something that's really important. And then, now that you're ready, with those thoughts in mind, bullet out your main points. So that gives you your outline to get started. Next, you want to compose. Now, composition for me is the hardest part. The reason why is I've been speaking since I was 12 years old in a public setting, and that was great experience for me. But when you tell me I have to give a speech, I have to write it, and I hate that part. I really, really do. It's just hard for me. I can think of 1,000 ideas in my head, but getting it into an organization that has continuity and will be effective for the people that are listening, and memorizing it and all those other things, I really don't like doing. Composing the speech is the hardest part for me. It may be the easiest for you, and it's the giving it that's difficult, but we're going to talk about that too. So I keep the approach to the composition very simple, because it's just a communication, no different from a conversation, a phone call, or an email. First, you want to introduce what you're talking about. You want to give everybody an idea of what it is. Many speakers will get very creative in their introduction, because one of the things you want to accomplish is you want to get their attention. So your introduction should be twofold. It gets their attention, and it tells them why you're here. Then you give them all the details that you need to give them so they can understand what you're talking about. The details, the devil is always in the details. You may have other people that have to provide you information. You may have to go do research. That's where that timing thing starts out. The details are critically important. They need to be organized so that they have impact. And then finally, that closing or call to action, whatever it is that you're going to accomplish at the very end, that is what you want them to remember after you finish speaking. Because sometimes that is the most important thing that they do remember, or maybe the only thing they remember. Now, there's some options, just some composing tips. You can write your script out completely. You can just do bullets, or you can do a PowerPoint. A full script gives you an advantage on your timing, because I have found over the years that if I create a Word document that has half-inch margins and is double-spaced, and I write 2.5 pages, that's a 5 to 7 minute speech. That's if I don't ad-lib, which I have a really bad habit of doing. So you have to keep in mind that if you've got questions or you're going to ad-lib, 2.5, maybe have to cut back to 2. But the important thing is you can type that out, and you can read it and time it and see where you are. It's going to be pretty close. If you go with a PowerPoint or you go with bullets, you don't know until you do it. So practice becomes very important. When you write it out, you also have the option to cut out extra and hard to say words or phrases. Sometimes when you write a sentence, it gets garbled, and if you've written it and you stand up to say it, it doesn't come out easily, change it, because that's not very good. So if you've got phrases or words that are very important, it's really good to highlight those, because one of the things that I've observed in myself and also of my fellow speakers here at Toastmasters is that sometimes a word is really important and we kind of garble it and you lose your audience. It's a really important word and they're thinking about what did I hear, not listening to you talk. So you want to highlight, I suggest if you write it out, highlight the important words. Even you can do this on a PowerPoint or a bulleted list. The important words and practice saying them clearly. And I'll warn you too about acronyms. Acronyms are your enemy if your audience doesn't know what they mean. So be really careful about using them. And if you are using them, make sure your audience understands what they mean. Finally, emphasis. Where do you want to emphasize? You've got to pick what's really important. That's where you're going to make sure you say it clearly, and you perhaps are going to add gestures, use your voice or your body to emphasize them. And finally, in a 2.5-pager that I write, I always insert a line where I want to pause. And there's 2 pauses that are really important. One between your introduction and your details, and another between your details and your conclusion. You give your audience a chance to catch up with you, to be where you are in the speech, and also a pause can be very powerful for you if you forget something. We do that. We get up there, we go, well, if you keep your cool, and you think about it without looking down or up, you look at your audience and you take that couple of seconds, you usually remember what you were supposed to say. They never do. They got confused. So pauses are your friend, really important to use. Tips on tools. Handouts can be very effective, but make sure that if you're going to hand them out during the meeting, that they are useful to the person, adjunct to what you're saying. Because you don't want to give them something that they're going to be reading when they should be talking, listening to you. Second, sometimes handouts are most powerful at the end when you say, by the way, I have more information for you, and I'm going to pass it out now. So be careful with handouts and make sure they don't distract them from listening to you. They came to hear you, and that's important. Which brings up PowerPoint. PowerPoint is a great tool, but many, many speeches are ruined by a PowerPoint presentation in my experience, and some of mine have too. Busy, 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 too much information. Not a good idea. Less is always better. This is a support tool. It is not your speech, and it is not your script. And I'm going to give you an example. So indulge me for a moment. I gave a speech, a year ago here about Eleanor of Aquitaine. I'm going to show you in just a moment a page that I created, which I thought was great, and then changed my mind. Eleanor of Aquitaine is one of my favorite women in history. She was born in the 12th century when people didn't live for very long and women were considered chattel. Eleanor of Aquitaine was a very lucky young lady because she was born into the family that controlled Aquitaine, which is about 1/3 of modern-day France. It's right across the English Channel from England. When she was just 20 years old, there was a deal cut between her father and the King of France, and she married Louis VII. Louis VII's father died, her father died, she inherited Aquitaine, Louis became king, she became queen. She was Queen of France. She had 2 daughters, and 7 years later, Louis allegedly divorced her. The story goes, it went so much that he divorced her, she didn't like him, he wanted a son, she hadn't given him one, but she orchestrated her marriage to Henry II of England. And she married him, and that was an important start to what her real life was going to be about. Because she and Henry had 8 children, 4 boys and 4 girls. She co-reigned with him throughout half of her life with him, the first half of her life with him, and they were very compatible, except people didn't like Henry. He wasn't such a good guy. They loved Eleanor. Whenever there was trouble in Aquitaine, Eleanor went to Aquitaine, the people there loved her, and they always handled it. Even in England, they loved her. But she and her husband fell out, ultimately, because of a major affair that he had, which was common in those days, and also because she sided with her oldest son, who was ready to be something more than just a prince. And that created a problem between she and her husband, and he imprisoned her for many years. But finally, he brought her out of imprisonment because he needed her in Aquitaine, and she continued, she outlived him. She outlived all but 2 of her children. Her son, Richard the Lionhearted, became King of England. Her son, John II, became King of England. And her grandson, Henry III, became King of England. This woman lived until 82. She was amazing. But if you read in history, if you ask everybody in the room how many of you have heard of them, most people haven't. Because she quietly did what she knew how to do. She was trained for it, she was up to it, and she was revered. I love her. My passion about her is really important, and I wanted everybody that I spoke to hear it. And so this is the PowerPoint page that I put together to help me tell that story. That is not what you want. It's too much. The audience is now reading, and they're not listening to my passion, they're not hearing what I have to say. This works much better. It helps the audience know a little bit about what I'm talking about, and it doesn't distract them. This is what you want, and quite frankly, many people in business will say, however, when I give this PowerPoint to somebody else, I want them to be able to see all the words. That's great, but don't speak to it. You can give them the PowerPoint that has all the words, but in the speech, use this type of approach. Here's another technique that I saw recently, which I thought was kind of cool. Just some numbers on a page. So here's the way I would use these numbers on a page. I'm here to tell you about the performance of the customer care unit this year. I want to be very, very specific about last month. Last month, the customer care unit handled 8,500 phone calls and inquiries. Of those 100, we have a SLA that says we have to respond to whoever contacts us within 24 hours. And we did that 100% of the time. Now, we also have a goal to get every resolution on every incident within 3 days. We can't always do that, but in the month of May, we did that 93.5% of the time. We're on the case for you. We're handling your customers' problems. The customer care unit is performing. That's how we'd use this approach. Next one. I rather like this one because it has to do with trends in recruiting. And I actually put this slide together properly the first time. I didn't have to redo it. Essentially, the market is so busy and is so competitive right now that it takes more and more inquiries for us, more and more candidates we have to find in order to make one hire. And you can see from 2017 to 2019 how that need has grown. And yet, in each of those years, we were hiring about the same number of people. Second, we were having trouble with declined offers. That's because other people are out there looking for the same people we aren't. We give a great offer to a candidate, and 9 declines in 2019 in the first quarter, we have been turned down. Last year, 1 in the same time frame. This is a tough market, and we're having to live with it. That's the message here. Simple and to the point, and a graphic can be very powerful. So think about that when you're doing your PowerPoints. Next, I want to talk about preparation. How do you prepare to give a good speech? Well, the first thing that you got to do, I suggest, is practice in front of the mirror. Practice that speech in front of the mirror so you see yourself and you get a feel for it. Then, record it on your phone. This is something I discovered recently that worked really well for me. I recorded it on my phone. Once I had it down pat, I thought, and then I listened to it. And then I tweaked it because I could hear things where I was garbling words and so on and so forth. I could hear it. Then I practiced some more, and I listened every day on the way to work and on the way back in the car because I have a pretty substantial commute. That helped me to learn it and be able to deliver it better when I was ready. And finally, make sure you get a good night's sleep the night before, which was very hard for me yesterday because I watched the NBA finals till midnight the night before. And it didn't turn out the way I wanted to. So I didn't sleep well once I did go to sleep. Finally, delivery. And this is not for everybody the first time out because you have to learn to do this as well as all the other things we just talked about. But here's some suggestions that will help you deliver well. First of all, when you assume your position in front of your audience, take a solid stance, your feet apart about shoulder, even with your shoulders, so that you're grounded. If your feet are together, you can be a little wobbly. If you're like this, you're looking like you're charging the audience. So go with the stance that makes you feel the most comfortable. Drop your hands to the side, take a deep breath, and relax. And you know what? Make sure as you start that you smile. A smile tells the audience, I want to be here, and a smile will come back from you when you smile to your audience. They will notice. Make eye contact when you're greeting your audience. Look all the way around. When you're doing your introduction and you're greeting them, that's a pretty easy piece of your speech. By the way, you wrote it at the beginning, you probably rewrote it 3 or 4 times. So make eye contact with the audience. That lets them know you're there for them. Next, and this is something we learned recently from Ron Cravat, which was a really great idea, speak more slowly and louder than you normally do. Because when you do that, you are less likely to garble your words or mumble, and you're more likely to articulate well so people can understand you. Louder and slower. And if you can do that, you're going to help yourself in your delivery. Finally, emphasize. Use your pauses effectively. Use your body. For instance, if you're getting ready to talk about something really important, pause, lean into your audience and drop your voice. They're going to lean in so they can hear you. Now you've got their attention. These are the kinds of things that you want to do to emphasize and get their attention. And then finally, close with impact. Plan, compose, prepare, and deliver. These are the important things about giving the best speech that you can give. And I give you 2 more pieces of advice or suggestions. One is if you're really interested in doing this, other than just at work, you might want to try Toastmasters International. You can go online and find a club that's right near you. Or if you just want to see what it's like, we invite you to Dogwood Toastmasters. We meet 8 to 10 every Saturday morning. And by the way, my last point is, don't forget to smile.